Right, welcome grade 10s. I'm going to go through how to structure a poetry essay. So here is an outline of one. So to create a good essay, it is needed to plan out the structure of a poem analysis essay so the writing stage will be easier and faster. Okay, so it's the same as how you've always done it with a mind map as planning. This is basically a mind map. This was taken from Essay Service. So here, the opening paragraph in which they state is to introduce the poem, title, author, and background. Body text, make most of the analysis, linking ideas. So your introduction is going to be the same as how you've done one for Romeo and Juliet, the literary essay. You would do much like before. You would start off with an introduction to the poem, analysis essay, so include the name of the poem and the author here. Other details like the date of when it was published can also be stated. Then some background information or interesting facts and trivia regarding the poem or author can also be included here. But remember, this is, you can include it, you don't have to. You can keep it the same as a literary essay we've done, where you start off with an introduction, same as how we did it before, where Romeo and Juliet is a play written by the famous playwright William Shakespeare, and then you can go into when it was published, or you can go into your essay question. So exactly how we did the literary essay introduction, you will do it for your poetry essay. Okay, the body stays mostly the same. So again, each paragraph that you will include will have its own theme, its own idea, and it will focus solely on that theme and that idea, right? So each body paragraph will be exactly the same as how we did the literary essay. Some good advice is to go back and watch the video on a literary essay, and then come back to this video and re-look at it with a sort of refresher on what the literary essay entailed. Right, so the only real difference in your body paragraph for a poetry essay is the following, is how you quote. When you quoted before in your literary essay, you didn't need to give, for instance, page 5. You didn't have to tell us the page number. However, with a poetry essay, you need to put the line number, because you have the poem in front of you. You are able to reference where you got that quote from. So let's say I took a quote, let's say I was reading a poem and I took a quote out of it. I want to use this quote, and the quote is, "A rose by any other name is still a rose." I will put in brackets line 12, because that is where I got the answer from. Sorry. It should be a small l, not a capital letter L. So it'll look something like this in your essay. So when you give an example, or when you give evidence to substantiate your points, you will put a quote, and when you quote in brackets, put the line number. Right. So that's on your body. It's basically the same. The only change is in quoting. Conclusion is bit the same, but a little bit different, right? So your conclusion, a lot of you struggled with in the literary essay. So please listen nicely. There should be no new information in your conclusion. You need to sum up basically what you have said and why you are saying it. So here, I'm going to read through this. Now this is where you should take a step back from analyzing the individual elements of the poem and work out its meaning as a whole. Combine the different elements of the analysis and put forward one main idea. What is the poet trying to say, and how is it enforced with what feeling? Then look at the meaning and what time frame does this evolve over. Right, so for example, is it obvious from the start, or does it gradually change towards the end? The last few lines that can be significant within a poem, and so should be included in the poem analysis essay conclusion and commented on the impact on the piece. So basically, the same as how you did Romeo and Juliet, you had to answer the question whether it was fear or fate that was responsible for the tragedy that unfolds within the play, and you needed to make your stance evident, and your stance would be the main idea behind it. So a good conclusion, for example, would include, or main idea of a conclusion would include, you could possibly include it as your introduction for your Romeo and Juliet literary essay. You could say, let's say you took the stance, it is both fear and fate. You would say, therefore, the audience it is made evidence to the audience by William Shakespeare that fear and fate are both responsible for the tragedy of the play, unlike what Goddard suggests, that it is solely fear that plays a role in the tragedy of the play. That's the main idea. That's basically why you write an essay. You're trying to tell us that Goddard is wrong. Shakespeare told us that it is fear and fate that is responsible, and this is my reason. So here you're basically just giving a summary of what you had said, similar to the literary essay. Again, watch the video again on the literary essay. It'll help you, okay, sort of understand this one better. Alright, so I'm just going to go through different elements when you're analyzing, for instance, the title, imagery, so on and so forth. Right, so if you are analyzing or want to analyze the title in the poem, you need to take a little bit of a step back and think, why would the poet choose this title? People, I mean, you're naming it. It's going to be the name of the poem. It's a very important few words. And they choose those few words because generally it is there to sort of set the scene or set our expectations as readers as to what the poem is going to be about, what is the tone of the poem as well. So it informs the tone of the poem. So for example, if you look at, let's say the poem was titled Alone by Edgar Allan Poe, we know that this poem is going to be about loneliness, right? So it's natural to assume that it would be sad. Okay, and then what is the literary style used for? For example, the work could be called His Last Sonnet by John Keats. So let's say if we're looking at the literary style of it, so here if you look at His Last Sonnet by John Keats, from appearance it is possible to deduce that it could be in sonnet form, or if not, why did the poet choose to mislead the audience? So this sort of sets us up for our expectations basically, and it also leads us to assume the literary style. If let's say they put a sonnet in the title, we're going to assume it's going to be 14 lines. Okay, so, and if it changes, what is the necessity of that change? So if you're analyzing the title, look at these things. You could also look at what the poem is about and how it enforces what the poem is going to be about. Right, structure of the poem. When looking at the structure of the piece, this will reveal more information, so pay close attention to this. Look at the organization and sections. This will unlock more questions. Okay, so what does each part discuss? How do the parts relate to each other? Can you see formal separations? What logical sense does it have? So is it stanza 1 informing stanza 2, or is stanza 2 contradicting stanza 1? Is there emotional sense that can be evaluated? Does having a strict format say anything about the poet? Also, for failing to have a strict structure, does it reveal something? So if it's written in free verse, what's the point? Once you have observed the structure, it is possible to go deeper into the poem analysis essay and investigate how the speaker communicates the poem to the reader. One very interesting way of some poets that choose to write a poem, for instance, in the form of a picture. So there was this one poem about coffee, and the poem was written in such a way that it formed around a coffee cup. So when you see the poem, it's this picture of a coffee cup, and when you look deeper, there's these words that are there, and that's the actual poem that created the picture of a coffee cup. So sometimes the structure does enforce or sort of inform us better as to the message the poet is trying to relay in his poem. Right, and then in the next part I'm going to go through the rest of this.